All right, so today let's do a deep dive into something pretty wild. This billionaire investor, Stanley Druckenmiller. He's betting BIG on airlines. Airlines, can you believe it? I mean, after everything that's happened, seems a little counterintuitive, don't you think?
Yeah, a bit.
So we're going to unpack why this is such a big deal, what it could mean for the industry, and maybe even for your next flight. Our main source material today is this article from the Motley Fool. They break down this whole thing.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so...
It is a head-scratcher at first, especially when you think about even Warren Buffett. You know, the Oracle of Omaha, he got rid of all his airline stocks back during the pandemic.
Oh, total.
He basically said the industry is way too unpredictable.
Too volatile.
Exactly.
Unpredictable and volatile. So to see someone like Druckenmiller, I mean, with his track record, remember, this is the guy who made a fortune betting against the British pound back in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
So it makes you wonder, does he see something that everyone else is missing?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And to understand his thinking, we need to understand who he is as an investor. He's not just chasing quick profits or anything. He's looking at the long game.
Okay.
The big macroeconomic trends, things like global economic growth, shifts in consumer behavior, even geopolitical events.
Wow.
These are the forces that shape his decisions.
What macroeconomic trends might be driving his outlook on airlines?
Well, one key factor is the travel industry's recovery. The pandemic was brutal.
Yeah, it was.
Airlines were losing tons of money. Travel demand just disappeared. A lot of experts were predicting a long and painful recovery.
Oh, yeah. I remember some analysts saying business travel would never fully recover. Everyone's just going to hop on Zoom calls forever.
Right. There was a lot of pessimism at the time, but it turns out they were a little too pessimistic.
Okay.
We're seeing travel demand bounce back, even stronger than a lot of people expected.
Really?
Yeah, people are eager to get back out there, explore the world, visit family and friends, reclaim those experiences they missed out on.
Makes sense. The article mentions something like 5.2 billion people are expected to fly in 2025.
Yeah.
That's wild.
That's a huge jump from where things were.
That is.
And that demand, it means more revenue for the airlines. They can rebuild and start investing in growth again.
But isn't the airline industry known for being kind of cyclical, like vulnerable to recessions and stuff?
Oh, absolutely. Airlines are what we call cyclical businesses. Their performance is closely tied to how the economy is doing.
Right.
When times are good, people travel more. Leisure and business.
Yeah.
But when the economy slows down, travel is one of the first things people cut back on.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a discretionary expense.
So that makes Druckenmiller's bet even more interesting. It's like he's saying, okay, I know airlines are cyclical, but I'm betting on a strong economic recovery and continued growth in travel demand.
Exactly.
It's almost a contrarian view.
It is. He's buying into a sector that a lot of other investors are still afraid of. He's betting that the recovery is real and that it's going to last. And it's not just about the number of travelers either. There's another trend at play here, the rise of premium services.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. What are these premium services, and why are they such a big deal?
Well, you've probably seen it yourself when you book flights. Airlines are offering more and more of these add-ons and upgrades to make the experience a little nicer.
Right.
Extra legroom, early boarding, priority baggage handling. Even refundable tickets,
Okay.
things that used to be standard, are now premium perks.
Yeah, like those basic economy fares where you basically just get a seat
Exactly.
and you have to pay extra for everything, even to choose your seat.
Yeah, and these premium services, they're making a lot of money for the airlines.
Wow.
They're tapping into travelers who are willing to pay more for comfort and convenience.
Well, I can definitely see the appeal, especially after being crammed into those tiny seats for so long.
For sure. And for business travelers who are always pressed for time, those perks can be worth the extra money.
So are these premium services just a way for airlines to make more money from us? Or is there something more to it?
It's a bit of both, honestly. On the one hand, airlines are definitely trying to maximize their revenue, but there's also a growing group of travelers who really value these perks.
Yeah.
And they're willing to pay for them. It's a shift in consumer behavior.
Okay.
And it plays right into Druckenmiller's investment.
So this whole premiumization trend is fascinating. But before we get too carried away with comfy seats and early boarding, let's look at the other side of things. The article also talks about some risks and challenges for the airline industry.
Right.
It's important to look at both sides.
Yeah, the bullish and the bearish cases.
So let's dive into those different perspectives.
Okay, so let's unpack this. On the one hand, airline stocks are looking pretty good right now. Their price-to-earnings ratios are pretty low compared to the rest of the market. That could mean they're undervalued, especially if travel demand keeps growing and these premium services keep taking off.
Right. But like we said, airlines are really sensitive to how the economy's doing.
Exactly. If the economy takes a hit, people start tightening their belts.
Yeah.
Travel is one of the first things to go.
Makes sense.
Leisure trips get postponed. businesses cut back on travel, suddenly those planes aren't so full anymore.
Right. And that brings up another question. Is this whole premiumization thing really going to last? Or is it just a fad?
It's hard to say for sure. I mean, will people keep paying extra for these perks when everything's getting more expensive?
Yeah.
Or will we see people start pushing back?
I mean, I get it. I like having extra legroom as much as the next person, but there's got to be a limit, right?
Yeah.
At some point, it just gets too expensive.
It's a tough balance for the airlines. They need to find that sweet spot
Yeah.
where they're offering enough value to justify the higher prices,
Right.
but they don't want to scare away customers either.
Okay. The article also mentioned something about corporate travel coming back.
Oh, right.
How does that play into all of this?
So that's another big factor.
Okay.
During the pandemic, business travel just disappeared.
Yeah, basically.
Everyone was working remotely, doing video calls.
Right.
And that was a huge problem for airlines because business travels, they usually book a more expensive ticket. I know those last-minute bookings and the premium cabin seats.
Makes sense. So is corporate travel back to where it was before the pandemic?
Not completely, but it's definitely growing as economies open back up. And companies figure out this whole hybrid work thing. We're seeing more and more business travel.
Okay.
It's still behind leisure travel, but if it keeps growing, that could really help the airlines.
Interesting. So we've got this surge in travel demand, this premiumization trend, and the possibility of a corporate travel comeback. Sounds like there's reason to be optimistic, but we can't forget about the risks. The economic uncertainty, the fact that airlines are so cyclical.
Right.
It feels like a bit of a gamble.
Yeah, there's always some risk when you invest, especially in an industry like airlines.
So is Druckenmiller right to be bullish on airlines?
Well, he's definitely putting his money where his mouth is, but even the best investors can be wrong sometimes.
Sure.
It's not really our place to give investment advice, but we can at least give you the information
Right.
and the different perspectives so you can make up your own mind.
Exactly. We're not saying go buy airline stocks, but we are saying this is a fascinating trend, and here's what one of the best investors in the world is doing. And here are the things you should think about.
We have this deep dive. It gives you a glimpse into what's happening in the airline industry. Whether
Yeah.
you're a frequent flyer or just someone who's interested in finance and investing, understanding these trends can be really helpful.
It's about asking yourself, where do I think the airline industry is going? Will these trends continue? Or are we going to hit some turbulence?
And here's something else to think about. Is this whole premiumization thing, is it a passing fad or is it a permanent shift? But think about it. If more and more people start paying for these premium services, what's that going to mean for the future of flying?
Right.
Will it become even more divided with a big gap between those who can afford the perks and those who can't?
That's a great question. It makes you think about not just the financial side of things, but the social and cultural changes too.
Exactly. And it all comes back to Stanley Druckenmiller and his bet.
Yeah.
Is he just riding a short-term wave, or does he see something bigger happening, a fundamental shift in consumer expectations and how airlines do business?
I guess only time will tell. But exploring these questions, weighing the evidence, that's what makes these deep dives so interesting.
Yeah.
Like putting together a puzzle, even if we don't have all the pieces.
Exactly.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the choices we make as travelers. Are we okay with paying more for a little extra comfort, even if it means, contributing to this divide on airplanes?
It's a good point. And it's part of a bigger conversation about income inequality
Right.
and how it shows up everywhere. Even something as basic as air travel.
Yeah.
As the gap between the rich and everyone else keeps growing, we're probably going to see an even bigger divide in the kinds of services and experiences that are offered, not just with airlines, but everywhere.
So it's like we're moving towards a world where everything has different tiers, and every experience is based on how much you can spend.
Yeah, and that raises questions about access and fairness.
Yep.
Should certain comforts and conveniences only be for the people who can afford them?
Right.
Or should everyone have a basic level of comfort and dignity, no matter how much money they make?
It's complicated.
It is. There are no easy answers.
It definitely adds another layer to things, like even just choosing a seat on a plane.
Exactly. It's not just about legroom or getting on the plane first anymore.
Right.
It's about how these choices reflect bigger trends in society.
So back to Stanley Druckenmiller and his big bet on airlines. What does it all mean? Is he just taking advantage of a trend that's going to fade away? Or is he betting on a fundamental shift in the whole airline industry and maybe even society as a whole?
That's the big question. Only time will tell how it all turns out.
True.
But by looking at these trends and thinking about the risks and the rewards. And having these conversations, we can at least start to figure things out for ourselves and make better decisions
Exactly
as
right.
travelers and as people living in this changing world.
That's what I love about these deep dives. We get to explore these complex issues
Yeah,
and challenge our own assumptions.
yeah.
And even if we don't always find the answers, the process of exploring is valuable.
Absolutely. It's about being curious, staying informed, and thinking critically. Because in a world with so much information, it's more important than ever to be able to separate the real from the fake.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into airlines and billionaire investors and the future of travel, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is pay attention to the choices you make, even the small ones, because they often reflect bigger trends and have consequences beyond just that one choice. Whether it's deciding to pay extra for legroom or thinking about whether these premium prices are sustainable, take a moment to reflect, consider the bigger picture, and be an active participant in shaping the world you want to live in.
I like that. That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds engaged. Until next time, safe travels, everyone.